Welcome back inside the Now Morning Show. Now it's Monday, which means that the TTPS join us on now in the form of Inspector Michelle Lewis. This morning, we're talking about how you can be more careful when you're being a motorist or a pedestrian. Good morning, Inspector.
Good morning to you both. Morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and good morning to your viewing and listening audience.
How are you doing this morning, Inspector?
We are well concerned, but well.
What are you concerned about?
Well, we are concerned with the amount of, with the increase that we have seen in motor vehicle accidents, particularly fatal road traffic accidents.
Right.
The police service continue to implement strategies and campaigns in relation to road safety, have the visibility of police officers on the road, issuing tickets, DUI and stuff like that. But we continue to see an increase in fatal road accidents, both with pedestrians and motorists. For example, yesterday morning, around 5 o'clock, about 4:15 yesterday morning on the Churchill-Roosevelt Highway, a 25-year-old man was driving his vehicle, proceeding east along the highway in the vicinity of National Canal, just before Mirror traffic light there. And he veered off and hit into a medium about 3 feet high. Then flipped a couple of times in the road on the other lane and landed on the 4 wheels of the vehicle facing south on the westbound lane.
Wow.
At 4:15 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday morning. Thankfully, it was a one-vehicle accident. The pedestrian in that vehicle survived and she is in stable condition. But the driver of the vehicle lost his life in that accident, and he came from, well, he lives Aberdeen and he's proceeding to Arima, based on the addresses that we have. So we know that is 2 things that could have contributed to that accident, either the speed or under the influence. It could be that the person was sleepy.
I was about to say falling asleep when you fall in that category.
One of the 2 things that we have noted is the increase in road traffic accident, particularly fatality, is driving under the influence or speeding. We have issued over 5,000 speed tickets for the year already, speed tickets only for the year already. And we have arrested quite a couple of persons in relation to the amount of persons who have been charged and driving over the influence.
So
under the influence,
Under the
over the
influence,
limits of the
over the speed limit, over the amount breathalyzer limit. Correct.
when people are arrested for any of these offences, do you think that it actually contributes to them making a change in their life?
It does, because when someone is, so those type of offences are generally called strict liability offences, because it's hard for you to prove or disprove the fact that based on the results of the breathalyzer test, which you have seen on the scene and which was taken at least on 2 occasions, that goes before the magistrate as evidence. You really can't disprove that, right? So that you get you go before the magistrate and you're charged, you can be fined $5,000, $9,000 on the first offense. On the second offense, and we have seen where magistrates on the second offense has actually disqualified persons from using the driver's license for a period of years, as well as $20,000. So if you are a person who drives all the time, you want your driver's permit so that you have to take stock to say that this is not something that you want to do. It really gives the drivers who are before the court or who are actually caught, because we only
could catch
that amount of persons.
Right.
And then all your WhatsApp groups just tell people which party police is. It doesn't help the situation. So we have to let people obey the law. Obey the law.
There are 5 C's in relation to motorists and pedestrians that we like to encourage persons to use.
To
be careful, to be courteous on the road, to be considerate, use common sense, of course.
Not common sense, Inspector.
No, common sense. Common sense is
not common. We established that long time.
Common sense and consideration.
Yeah. Okay.
Both for pedestrians and for motorists, because sometimes you have pedestrians who walk the road, cross the road in ways that are not considered.
How should people be crossing the road? Because there's several times where I just want to become that motorist that will get 5 points for knocking down somebody. Because
but thank God you are not.
I am not.
And it comes out your mind quickly.
I mean, not so quickly, because it's come out my mind like as slow as they just cross the road. That's the challenge I have.
But we don't have pedestrian crossings at every area, right?
Right.
But really and truly, if a pedestrian is crossing, you should give the right of way to a pedestrian, right? However, we do have some pedestrians who cross the road in a very careless manner, hence the reason for the 5 C's for both motorists and pedestrians. So in the first case, you'll probably look to cross at a pedestrian crossing,
right,
where the blinking traffic lights or pedestrian crossing, right? And of course, as a pedestrian, you know, you were saying it earlier on, right? You stop, look and listen as a pedestrian, and you make eye contact with the drivers of the vehicle to ensure that they are seeing you, because there are some blind spots as a driver that you don't see. I remember last month there was a pedestrian that got knocked down right in the vicinity of Trin City Mall. He was crossing the highway, a 31-year-old man, about 7 o'clock in the night. You know, so, and I mean, that's the highway. You know, there's the eastbound lane and then there's the westbound lane. So you have to be, and not only that, but sometimes when you cross an intersection where there's no pedestrian crossing, vehicles are turning into another direction.
Exactly.
So it's important that you really operate and exercise due care when you are crossing the road.
So talking about exercising due care, all right, this is something I've always wanted to hear about, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation this morning. What about in situations where there is a zebra crossing, there is a walkover as well, but yet we see individuals who still elect to run across the road, run across the highway, and so much more. Especially, let's say, for an example, there's a highway, there are no lights, and people are just going, and there's a walkover. And people just don't use the walkover.
And we have seen accidents happen like that. We have seen it at, you know.
Is there a right and wrong? I mean, at the end of the day, if you get knocked down, you're not going to be, you know, in a good place either way. But is there a right and wrong in that situation? Because you said earlier that we have to give way to pedestrians as drivers, right?
But the highway, so there are different laws that govern the highway as opposed to the Eastern Main Road and the Priority Passage, right? And so the highway, looking at the traffic light, and sometimes it's a far distance. In most cases on the highway there's a median, so what some pedestrians would do that they would cross in between and then cross again. What I've noted within the last couple of years is that the government has tried to implement either the
walkover,
at areas where they know there's a residential area or a lot of people using it, so that it will eliminate accidents like that kind. So it is really incumbent on the persons, the pedestrians, to utilize those things, those infrastructures that have been put there for your safety. It's really important that you use it. So when there are accidents, when there are accidents that do happen outside of that, you take into account all factors, right? Because the pedestrians are not always right where there's a motor vehicle and pedestrian.
That's the part I want to make sure we're on the same page.
No, they're not always.
When I see people running across the highway in that haphazard manner, especially if they're running underneath a walkover, I as a man don't really slow down, because you taking a risk on your life. And I'm on the highway.
And then if you just smash a sudden brakes, as we would say here,
I could get into exactly the person behind me coming up behind at the same 100 miles per hour coming up the road.
But you have, so the persons, a lot of times when, well, not a lot of times, but sometimes when persons are crossing the road, they try to gauge the speed of a vehicle, right, to see whether they could take a chance, which is not a good thing to do. No,
it's not.
And so you as a driver, you have the horn to use, which you have to use to let the person know there's an oncoming vehicle and for them to step at the side, and you drive slower because you have now observed the person coming.
If you
so
see
you're
them.
not going to be deliberate.
If you see them.
Well, you remember you just talked about you.
But no, when I see them, by the time I see them, they're running across already.
No, but it's important that as a driver that you also obey the speed limit, that you are driving at such a speed that you can slow down, because you can be driving behind a vehicle, and if that vehicle mashes a brakes, then you ought to be at a distance and a control of the vehicle that you can slow down as well. So all those things are put in place to eliminate accident, both with two vehicles or a vehicle and a pedestrian.
So I do have a question, if you can, of course. Let's say, for example, in a situation like this where you have a walkover and somebody has decided that they're going to run across the highway instead. You opt to blow your horn, nothing happens. You mash brakes, your car ends up flipping, and you end up the one damaged, and the pedestrian is fine. What happens in a situation like that?
You end up
damaged. You end up injured. Your car ends up being damaged, and
the pedestrian
is
causes
fine.
the accident and goes their merry way. Life continues for them, and what happens in that situation?
But we have a couple of things, right? Because now you're looking at the insurance for the vehicle,
Right.
And I mean, the insurance will take into account the facts that are related.
Right.
Where, for example, there are CCTV cameras that can support what you have said. One independent person, meaning like a driver or somebody that was standing at the side of the road, to validate what you are saying, to make sure that what you are saying is true. Then the insurance will have to take into account all the factors, because remember, you are injured.
But what about like a criminal charge?
What I want to know is the pedestrian liable to be charged if they're crossing under a walkover and cause an accident?
Yeah.
No, because the pedestrian, whether it's a pedestrian or two vehicle. So sometimes somebody give you a bad drive.
Right.
That person has driven and gone his or her way.
Right.
But you would have gotten into an accident as a result of that. Right? So whether it's pedestrian or two vehicles.
Right.
But because of that bad drive that you got, you now end up in an accident. But that driver has gone his or her way, right? In a case like that, you go to the station and you make your report, and in your report, because now it's the insurance who really comes into the play in relation to the fixing of the motor vehicle.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we reach the fixing of the vehicle. No, we figure that part out. The fixing part go hard from insurance. But as far as the police concerned, are there any charges that can be laid on those people who bad drive here or pedestrians who run across the road and cause accidents?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay.
Not that I am aware of, because there was no contact with the other party.
Right.
It will just go in support of what you are saying, that you were not wholly and solely negligent or careless in your driving on the roadway.
That's something to really sit down and think about.
No, I feel we have to talk to one of them policymakers on them, see if you can change the policy a little bit, because everybody should be.
Contact.
Once there's no contact, there's no charge to be laid.
Because remember, you're expected to be driving at such a speed that you are able to stop and slow down or turn left or right to avoid. Hence the reason why there's a speed limit. But having a speed limit doesn't mean that you cannot drive below the speed limit for your own safety and the safety of others.
And then the blind spot, you mentioned the blind spot before, so if the blind spot happens and you're not able to react in time, then you could end up in a problem situation.
And then sometimes the sun is in your eyes.
All them things, chariot factors, white rain, all kind of things.
So those are factors that are taken into consideration in relation to any accident. And of course, if your vehicle, if the traction on your tires and all those things.
Yeah, so you have to make sure your car in a good place, make sure you're in a good place, make sure you can see what's going on, and if you drive below the speed limit, you're saying, to make sure that you can navigate properly. Yeah, you don't have to drive at the speed limit, you can drive below, but it's important that both pedestrians and motorists exercise care. Be careful when you're driving the road, be courteous, be considerate to other drivers, use common sense. In other words, if the road is not clear enough to run across the road, you won't make it.
Inspector, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having us.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show, of course, and this is probably a conversation we're going to continue at some point in time. Trinidad and Tobago, talking about road safety and your duty of care, whether you're a motorist or pedestrian. We'll be back after this short break right here on Now.
Let's say thanks to the police all around, especially